Good morning, everyone.
Morning. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, Jerry. Good morning, Sherry. We'll get started in 1 minute. Jerry, I just made you a co-host, okay?
Very good. Thank you.
All right, it is 10 a.m., so we will take this opportunity to get started. I want to first introduce myself to anyone that does not know who I am. My name is Daniel Banier. I'm the director of Osher Lifelong Learning Program, and we're offering this free seminar for our OLLI members and guests in our community. If you're new to Osher Lifelong Learning and aren't really familiar with us, I want to make sure you know who we are. Osher Lifelong Learning at Cal State Channel Islands has been around for 18 years, and we offer classes for anyone that's 50 years and older that have classes in history, art, music, the list goes on. And there's no grades, tests, assignments. There might be some readings to support your learning from our great instructors. So I just want to make sure that you know that our registration is open for Spring 1. Classes begin next Monday, a week from today. I will put in the chat our link to register. If you have not registered for Spring 1, I highly recommend that you register soon. We have classes that are available via Zoom as well as face-to-face at Studio Channel Islands Art Museum and also at the campus library. Today we have a great topic on Nubia, the Jewels of Ancient Sudan, being taught by Scott Jones, who's a docent at J. Paul Getty Museum, Getty Villa. And he gives tours on Roman architecture, and he's also giving a tour this Wednesday for a select group on Nubia. Scott is a retired U.S. Navy captain with more than 30 years of service and post-military experience in strategic planning and business development. At this time, I'd like to turn the microphone over to your instructor today. This will be a 1-hour free seminar for all of you that are here. And at this time, there'll be a time for Q&A based on Scott when he's ready to do that. With that being said, I'll pass the microphone over.
Thank you, Daniel. Good morning, everyone. I am Scott Jones, and thank you for joining us today to explore ancient Nubia and some of the fantastic jewels of the ancient Sudan. This is a exhibit that is ongoing at the Getty Villa in Malibu, California. And if you can come down and see the exhibit, I think that you're going to be amazed at the beauty and sophistication of the jewelry that is on display there. As Daniel mentioned, there are for about 30 of you or 40, there will be some tours that I'll give in person this Wednesday and Thursday. I would like to note that throughout the week and weekend, there are docent-led tours of the Nubia exhibit that are given at 11:15 and 1:45 every day. All the tours at the Getty Villa are free, and if you're not on our pre-registered list, feel free to come down to the villa and see us. To get to the Getty Villa from the Getty Villa is located on Pacific Coast Highway between Sunset Boulevard and Topanga Canyon. If you're coming south from Ventura County, most people use the 101 to get to either Canaan, Las Virgenes, or Topanga to cross over to PCH and then continue on down to the Getty Villa. I would like to note that during the recent rains, there have been a lot of mudslides on these roads. So before you head out, check and make sure that the roads are open. They've been scraping off a lot of big boulders that have crashed down onto the roads, which is pretty normal when we have a heavy rain. And also a reminder that the entrance to the Getty Villa, shown in this picture here, it can only be accessed from northbound PCH. So if you're coming southbound, as most people from Ventura County will, you can't make a U-turn here. You have to proceed about another quarter mile to Sunset Boulevard, make a left, then perform a U-turn, and that'll get you back onto PCH northbound, and you can enter the Getty Villa there. When we meet up on Wednesday and Thursday, please meet us in front of the museum store about 5 minutes before the start of our tour. And on that's going to be at 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. on Wednesday and at 3 p.m. on Thursday. Our tour sizes are limited in the galleries to just 15 people, which is why we've had to limit the number of people that we can accommodate. But you know, your pass will get you into the Getty Villa. You can do whatever you want to when you're in the villa, and I highly recommend that if you've got the time, sign up for an architecture or garden tour. Collection tours are also given at 11 and 1:15. You can do shopping, and I will say that there is a nice collection of Nubia themed jewelry now in the bookstore. You can visit the magnificent galleries there at the Getty Villa and explore the gardens. I recommend that before you come down, that you download the Getty app for use with your Apple or Android friend. You can find that app at getty.edu.visit.app. Cheryl, I see your message.
Your picture was a minute ago.
I took it off.
Yeah, Cheryl, I see your message. And your answer is yes. You can certainly bring friends when you come. Also, be sure to bring your cameras, but remember when you're in the galleries, you can't use your flash.
Scott,
Yes.
the scheduled trips are full based on your limits.
Yes, they are.
Okay, just so friends right now, it's not so good.
Okay, thank you, Ann. So a little bit of context about this.
Unmute. Start video.
Okay, a little bit of context about this exhibit. It's part of the Getty Museum's ongoing effort to expand the exploration of cultures that have had significant impact on, Western civilization. Typically at the Getty Villa, we concentrate on artifacts from ancient Greece and Rome. But the recent outreach has given us exhibitions that have highlighted Palmyra, Mesopotamia, Syria, and ancient Persia. And of course, now we have Nubian. In the near future, there will be exhibits on Thrace and Egypt. And if it works out, we will also do some special OLI tours for those as well. This exhibit at the Getty Villa is on loan to us from Boston's Museum of Fine Arts. The MFA collection has over 65,000 Nubian artifacts. It's the largest collection outside of Sudan. And these were acquired during excavations that were made between 1913 and 1932. This display will be open at the Getty Villa until early April of this year, 2023. Now, the scope of the exhibition covers nearly 3,000 years of history in ancient Nubia. Most of the artifacts that we're going to see come from royal tombs and include jewelry and luxury items. The exhibit explores the cultural and commercial interaction of Nubia with ancient Egypt, Assyria, Persia, Greece, and Rome. What's fascinating about Nubia is that despite its interaction with these powerful imperial empires, Egypt, Assyria, Persia, Greece, and Rome, Nubia throughout this entire period maintains its unique independence and cultural identity. And the period of time that we're talking about covers from about 2400 BC to 350 AD, when the Nubian kingdoms were conquered by invaders from the south. Now, you may be wondering, where is Nubia? You know, frankly, most Americans are not really too conversant in the geography of Africa. You know, the United Nations represents 54 African countries, and none of them are named Nubia. There's a Namibia down in the southwest, but that's just not another spelling of Nubia. That's a whole different thing altogether. And to make it even more confusing, the people who lived in Nubia didn't even call themselves Nubian. That all started with the Romans. But Nubia is in the northeast corner of Africa, and the Nubians called their kingdom Kush, K-U-S-H. So the picture shows where the kingdom of Kush was located along the Nile River Valley and what is now southern Egypt and northern Sudan. The traditional border of the kingdom of Kush was the first cataract of the Nile River near what is Aswan today. Now, cataracts are shallow whitewater rapids on the Nile River. Comes from the Greek word meaning to flow down. And there are 6 cataracts on the Nile, counting from going north to south as where they are. So you can see where those cataracts are, and they are all within the ancient kingdom of Kush. Now, there were a series of excavations done in Sudan between Boston Museum of Fine Arts and Harvard University that were conducted at 3 specific sites in Nubia between 1913 and 1932. The expedition was conducted under the auspices of the Egyptian government, which at that time was responsible for the oversight of Sudan. The artifacts that were uncovered during this excavation were divided equally between Boston MFA and Sudan. So the artifacts that are not in Boston are presently on display at the National Museum of Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. Now, they divided up during the excavations, they divided up the artifacts under a system that they called partage. Partage comes from the French word partager, meaning to share. And it was put in place in the early 20th century to enable excavations like this to equitably divide the ownership of the artifacts that were discovered, and enabled these foreign-led expeditions into places like Sudan to provide the expertise and financing to mount expeditions while dividing equally with the host country. Now, how they divided these things, it's kind of interesting. Obviously, you can't break a statue in two where each party gets a half of the statue. But for things that were found in pairs, like earrings, for example, and we'll see a lot of earrings. One earring went to Boston, the other earring went to Khartoum. So, when we look at a beautiful earring at the Getty Villa, to see a complete set, you're going to have to travel to Khartoum. The Nubian expeditions were carried out under the leadership of a guy named George Andrew Reisner. Reisner was a brilliant archaeologist. He was known as the father of Egyptology in the United States, and he was the curator of the Egyptology collection at Boston Museum of Fine Arts, as well as a lecturing Egyptologist at Harvard University. And although Reisner was a brilliant archaeologist, he was a product of his times. So these excavations that were going on between 1913 and 1932 had people like Reisner who took with them all the cultural biases that they would have grown up with. For example, when Reisner began uncovering some of these fantastic artifacts, beautifully made, very high degree of skill and technology, Reisner never believed that they could have been made by Nubians. He thought that they were made by Egyptians or one of the rulers over Egyptian, like Greeks or Persians or somebody like that. He never believed that the Nubians themselves had the ability to make those types of artifacts or to build the kind of cities that they uncovered. Of course, we know that was all completely wrong now, but those attitudes in the early part of the 20th century helped create a kind of mystery about Nubia. A lot of people don't know a lot about Nubia, and part of that comes from these biases that people like Reisner had back in the teens and 20s of the 20th century, where they just didn't believe that Black Africa was as sophisticated as we know it to be now. But over this period, that the excavations were going on, they basically dug at 3 sites. A site called Kerma, Napata, and Meroe. These excavation sites also correspond to the 3 capitals of Nubia that existed between 2400 BC and 350 AD, where Kerma is the earliest capital. And then the center of gravity for the Nubian kingdoms shifted south to Napata. And then as Egypt was taken over by other empires like the Assyrians, the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans, the Nubian Empire moved its way even farther south to what is known as Meroe today. So let's chat about Kerma first. And the Kerma period is from about 2400 BC to 1050 BC. Now, the area around Kerma along the Nile River in the Nile River Valley there has been inhabited since about 8000 BC. But it becomes a city-state at about 2500 BC, and it controls the area between the first and fourth cataracts of the Nile. It's about a 600-mile linear length. And, you know, the kingdom is pretty much restricted to a very narrow strip of land on either side of the Nile, the rest of it being desert. So if you've been to Egypt before, you know that, you know, you don't have to go very far from the Nile to know that you are out in the middle of the Sahara Desert. But during this period that Kerma was operating as a kind of an independent city-state kingdom, they built monumental buildings made out of adobe brick, primary source of a building material. Today those are called difufas. And here's a picture of a difufa structure in ancient Kerma. You can see some of the foundations of the building around it in front. And then what looks like, you know, an outcropping of sandstone is in fact eroded adobe. So these were significantly sized buildings that were temples, tombs, and government buildings. For several centuries during this Kerma period, Kerma and Egypt engaged in intermittent warfare, trade, and cultural exchange. They had a similar religion, and they had significant intermarriage between the Nubian peoples who were living in Kerma and the Egyptians who were farther north. Finally, Egypt launches an invasion of Kerma and annexes it into the Egyptian Empire during the period of 1550 to 1050. Now, when we look at the artifacts and jewelry during the Kerma period, these, by the way, are some of the artifacts we're going to see on our tour. They're the earliest known artifacts from Nubia. And they use a lot of organic materials. For example, the white piece on top is made from a seashell, and it's a hairpiece. hair would have been drawn through the long, narrow slot, and then tied up in a bunch with the hole, and would have been used to keep hair out of your eyes. The cuff bracelets underneath are made out of hippopotamus ivory. So we will see a lot of minerals being used by the Nubians in Kerma, seashells, bone, and ivory. There are extensive trade networks that begin to develop between Kerma and Egypt to the north, the Red Sea to the east, and sub-Saharan Africa to the south. And the area of Kerma becomes a major trade route between sub-Saharan Africa and Egypt, and eventually India and China will interact with Egypt and Europe by coming in to the Red Sea, crossing through Nubia, and then moving northwards. One of the things that is really interesting, and we'll see in our examination of these artifacts in person, is the influence that Egypt had on locally sourced materials. So as time progresses and trade with Egypt increases over this period, we see more and more artifacts that begin to take on the flavor of Egypt. And it's quite interesting to see that. It's one of the things we will want to look for when we're examining these artifacts in person. So throughout this entire period, we have a very complex relationship between Kerma, Egypt, and tropical Africa going on. So we have an exchange of cultures, religion, intermarriage, and settlers, people moving back and forth throughout this entire period. One of the substances that we will see a lot of, and is really an amazing substance, is faience. Faience is a man-made substance. So these three pictures of faience here, to the right are a string of melon beads. You can, if you look closely, you can see the striations on the beads to make them look like melons. We have a pendant of a scorpion that was probably worn around the neck of someone to help protect them from scorpion bites, which were a real danger. And then on the left, we see a necklace carrying a piece of natural quartz, which is very prevalent in the area, and a string of beads made from faience. Now, the technology behind faience is really interesting. And, if you think about how the ancients actually developed faience, it's fascinating. Faience actually developed in the Near East and then migrated to Egypt and Nubia about 5,000 BC. So for 7,000 years, they were making these man-made materials. It included crushed quartz or sand that would be ground up into a very fine powder. They would add to that a little bit of lime. They get the coloring from metallic minerals like azurite or malachite that have high copper in them. which enables them to get kind of a bluish green color. They would add ground up salt or natron that they would get off of evaporated lake beds or the seashore. And they would add a little bit of water, and they would work this material into a paste. And then they would either shape their objects by hand, or they would press them into clay molds. The mixture was then fired at a very precise temperature between 1600 and 1700 degrees Fahrenheit. Very precise. To achieve these temperatures would require the use of bellows. You would not get this just from a normal kiln that's wood fired. You would have to use bellows to get the temperature up. And the ancient Nubians and Egyptians felt that the faience objects were magical. They, when you get them to 1600 to 1700 degrees, the quartz and silicon mix with the lime and salt and form a natural glaze around the outside. And that the ancients believed represented the undying shimmer of the sun. And we'll see lots and lots of faience jewelry in Nubia that is quite stunning in its technical details. Any questions about faience? I'll pause here, or anything else that we've covered up to this point.
Scott, how big are those beads? Are they like little marbles or much bigger?
So the beads that are to the right are pretty good size. I mean, they're about that big around. The beads to the left are smaller. They're about the size of pearls.
The beads are very uniform. How did they got them uniform in molds, and how did they measure the temperatures?
Yeah, so that's a great idea. They did make these in molds, but for a lot of the smaller beads, they could have made them by rolling the paste in their hands. The temperature is a great question. They would build windows in their kilns that they could look into and monitor the flame. And over time, they became very skilled at looking at the flame and knowing how much additional air from bellows put into the kiln would produce the right temperature. If they were too hot, the glaze tended to slide off the material and wouldn't stick. And if it was too cool, below 1600 degrees or below 1500 degrees, it wouldn't form a glaze. So they, by working back and forth with the bellows, they could determine what the temperature was. And there was a range of about 50 to 75 degrees that they could make the faience in. But every single piece of faience is going to be different because it's going to have a slightly different composition of the minerals in it that produce the color, slightly different compositions of salt and so forth. So they're, each faience object is going to be unique.
Is faience still used today?
Yes, it is. Faience is still used today.
How strong is this compared to concrete? Is it like a chalky that could crack, or is it more firm?
Yeah, so I would say it's more like a ceramic, like a glass ceramic. So, you could definitely smash it. It could get broken, but it was pretty sturdy. Okay, hearing no other questions, we'll move on. One of the most interesting objects that you're going to see is fly ornaments. Now, in this part of the world, they have a very mean fly. It's called a melodic fly. They bite. You can't wave them off. They will keep coming at you over and over and over. They have a mean bite. You know, they are vicious flies. Interestingly, they symbolized military prowess, and Kerma warriors would be awarded fly pendants. You know, as we would give out medals for heroic deeds in battle. A fly pendant that you're looking at here is one of the ones in the exhibit. It's made out of brass and ivory. And these were found in burial tombs, along with swords and daggers, to denote a high status warrior. So the fly then is a symbol of persistence and resolve, which was valued characteristics for the Kerma warriors. Were later adopted by the Egyptians. You know, I'm retired, a naval officer. Several of you all also may be veterans. You know, units and often adopt animals as mascots. You know, the flying tigers of World War II and so forth. I think if it was up to me, I'm not sure I would pick a fly as my mascot, but it worked for the Nubians and also for the Egyptians, because we see many of these fly pendants also showing up in Egyptian tombs of later periods. So we know that they migrated northward from Nubia up into Egypt. Kerma was a very militaristic culture. Nubian archers were frequently used as mercenaries in Egyptian armies. Later on, they were also used by the Romans and by the Carthaginians. They also, or the Egyptians, were forced to construct massive fortresses at the southern end of their empire between the first and second cataracts, not only to control trade with Nubia, but to constrain military excursions, raids up into Egypt. So in a lot of the high status graves of ancient Nubia, we find bow and arrows, daggers, and swords to signify the prowess of the deceased person. So now we're going to talk about an area known as Napata, and this period goes from about 750 to 350 BC, period of 400 years. And what's really fascinating about Napata is that, you know, you recall from the last set of slides, Egypt had moved south to conquer Nubia, or the kingdom of Kush, as they call themselves. But at about 750, Egypt has gone through a period of internal strife and decline. The kingdom of Kush gets their act together and they launch an invasion of Egypt. And they conquer all of Egypt, all the way up through the Nile Delta to the north. This is known in history as the 25th dynasty, frequently referred to as the era of the Black Pharaohs. So a lot of people don't realize today that the Nubians actually conquered and ruled Egypt. They ruled for a long period of time, almost 100 years. They assimilated widely into Egyptian society. And under the Nubians, there was a revival of culture, religion, artistic expression, and architecture throughout Upper and Lower Egypt. The 25th dynasty also revived the tradition of building pyramids. And in the areas of Napata and farther south in Meroe are hundreds of pyramids. Now, they're not as large as the pyramids of Giza, for example, but they are prolific. And today there are many more pyramids in what used to be Nubia than there are in Egypt. And they use these pyramids for tombs, just like the Egyptians did. Now, during the Napata era, this produces some of the finest artifacts of all in the from the Nubian culture. When we look at these artifacts on the right, we have a faience, a pectoral, a rather large piece of faience that would have been worn around the neck. There is a gold-colored collar, neck collar, that's actually made out of a substance known as electrum. Electrum is a naturally occurring aggregate of gold and silver. We have beautifully worked gold pieces, like the gold ewer there, and the gold Isis medallion. And then probably, at least in my opinion, one of the finest pieces in the entire exhibit is this pendant in the lower right, which is made from a rock crystal and gold and worked in several different techniques. It's rather small, but it's quite magnificent. And I think you're gonna love it when you see it in person. So during this 25th dynasty, we have an enormous profusion of these luxury artifacts of amazing skill and quality. During this period, the Nubians embraced the religion, writing, and values of Egypt. So they were writing in hieroglyphics and worshiping the same gods as the Egyptians were. As they consolidated power and in Egypt, they began to push eastward up into Judea and the Levant, around the area of Jerusalem and Assyria. When they did that, they came into conflict with the Assyrian Empire under a guy named Ashurbanipal, who happened to be expanding west at the same time. So we have the kingdom of Kush under the Nubians clashing with the mighty Assyrian Empire during this period. In 670, Assyria launches an invasion of Egypt. They defeat the Nubians and they push them to the south again, below the First Cataract. And the Assyrians set up a series of vassal rulers that we now call the 26th dynasty of ancient Egypt. One of the fascinating things that we're going to see in the exhibit is horse jewelry. Many horse graves have been excavated from the Napatan period, and they could all contain ornate jewelry made of bronze, faience, and they all indicate the importance of horses to the military culture of Nubia. Now, Beverly, I see your note where you've asked me to zoom in on the pendant. I have a blown up picture of that a little bit later on. If you can just be patient with me, I'll get there. Horse-mounted warriors and chariots were the key to the Kushite war machine. So when you see these rather large faience beads and bronze jewelry that would have adorned the Nubian cavalry, and you can kind of close your eyes and imagine hundreds of these horses galloping along the sands, and the noise that the rattling of all that faience and bronze would have made. It would have made, I think, a very interesting aspect to seeing these horsemen come after you. So Nubia and the Assyrians actually got along with each other pretty well. Here is a statue that you'll see of a guy named King Sinq-Amen-Iskin. And Sinq-Amen-Iskin actually ruled the kingdom of Kush after the Assyrians took over. But you can tell from the way he looks, I mean, he looks very Egyptian. He's got that Egyptian walk, the Egyptian stance. We'll see him in person, and we'll see all the areas of this granite statue that have been covered in gold. So after the Nubians withdrew down to their traditional boundaries, they still maintain very strong economic ties with Egypt. A lot of trade is going back and forth. So the kingdom of Kush then retains its role as an important trade route between sub-Saharan Africa and Egypt. So cattle, gold, ebony wood, ivory, and exotic animals are flowing north through Kushite lands into Egypt and beyond. Now, toward the end of the Napatan period, the Assyrians are supplanted by an invasion from Persia. And a Persian emperor named Cambyses invades Egypt in 525. If you know anything about Persian history, Cambyses is the guy in between Darius I and Xerxes. So Cambyses was a son of Darius I and a cousin of, Cambyses was a son of Cyrus, a cousin of Darius I. But the arrival of the Persians see a gradual decline in Napata, becomes less important. So the Nubians, over a period of a couple of 100 years, gradually shift their center of gravity from Napata down to an area known as Meroe. And as the 27th dynasty begins, under the Persia, Egypt becomes a satrap or a province of the
Is Scott frozen?
Yes, frozen.
Scott is frozen. Scott, if you can hear me, you're frozen. And it's not a audio, it's just he's frozen altogether. So let's see if we can have him log off and log back on. Just give us a second, please. All right, so what that means is probably he needs to log off and log back on. Scott, if you can hear me, go ahead and log back off Zoom and log back on. We'll be right with you, everyone. Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
okay, I can't hear you, Daniel. I
can hear you now.
Yeah, we had a power transient here. I'm bringing my computer back up. I'm talking to you on my wife's computer, which doesn't have the program loaded. So if you can give me just a few minutes, I'll be back.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
And I apologize for this. You know, it's always something.
No
Always a
problem.
technology.
Totally expected.
Yeah, we lost Jerry Clifford due to technology as well. So we will see what we can do. Do we have any new potential members for Ollie, or this is your first time visiting Ollie? If you can do a hand raise or reaction, we'd love to see if anyone is new to our Ollie program here this morning. Welcome. Great. So I'll do a song and dance while we get Scott's technology back up.
Well, I have a question, if that's
yeah.
okay, or comment. I'm really excited that Ollie's going to be doing more tours at the Getty and tie them into these lectures. I just think that's a great idea and I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Cheryl, and thank you for that input. I want to thank our events team for putting these together. You know, the idea is to offer a lecture or seminar prior to an actual visit of a location. So we will continue to do that.
Mark that down on my appraisal, please.
Yes, you got it, Anne. Thank you, Anne, for helping.
It's
us with
so
this.
wonderful, even though I didn't get in time to go to the actual event. Having this beforehand when I go on my own will just make it so much more meaningful.
Very good. Great feedback. Yeah, we only could get 27 seats for this tour coming up on Wednesday, but clearly you guys can all visit on your own time. Beautiful. The Getty's beautiful. I've been there a couple of times. It's really great. And to be able to go to the exhibit, understand it is always great.
Yeah.
And also, as I said earlier in the beginning, Osher Lifelong Learning is for anyone that's 50 years and older to take classes. We offer 6-week classes. This spring, we're offering 10 different classes on different subjects. Our locations that we're offering classes are at Studio Channel Islands Art Museum, which is in downtown Camarillo, as well as we're offering at the campus library in our Ollie classroom. I will also share exciting news because I do have a pretty big audience. We have 2 new locations offering classes in spring session 2, which will be in March. We will have a new location in Ventura, and that will be at the Ventura School of Law. I don't remember the exit, but it's really close to the freeway, as well as free parking. And it's a beautiful location to offer classes. And we will also offer classes in Thousand Oaks at the Caneo Chamber of Commerce starting in spring too. And that location is off of Hillcrest. I do know that location. With
The
that being
School
said-
of Law is off of Market Street.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Interesting. So you're
Okay.
still gonna offer the Zoom though, because that's the reason I can attend.
Yes, we're going to be offering hybrid classes at our locations. So
Awesome.
people that want to be on Zoom can be on Zoom, and the people that want to be face-to-face can be more local to their city that they live in. It looks like we have Scott back. Scott,
Back.
I don't want to take any more of your lecture this morning, but I will stay on for anyone that's new to Ollie and answer any questions about Ollie after the lecture. And I'll stay on as long as you have questions. With that being said, we will share our PowerPoint presentation now.
Okay, if you could make me a co-host and then I can get back in. Got it.
Done.
Okay, I think we're back. How does that look?
Looks good to me, Scott.
Moreau period.
Meroe, yes. I apologize that we had a power transit here and it just went boom. And
You're worth the wait.
yeah, thanks. Let me get this. I think my screen is a little screwy. What?
Yeah, it's cutting off on the left side. for
Yeah,
me.
yeah. Yeah, let me get that. How does that look?
I see it white. I mean, you've got the slide in a white background.
Okay, that's not right.
It also looks a little hazy to me. Oh, here, it's bright again. That's better.
Program showing. You've got the program showing. You see what I'm saying?
It looks pretty good.
If you make it full screen, maybe all that.
Try going full screen on that. It'll open up.
There you go.
How about now?
Same, still, Scott. Your slide is in a white background, like it's not full screen.
We can enlarge it on our own screens.
We can see it, Scott. You can go ahead.
All right, well, I apologize, but let's press on. I think I got it figured out. Hang on, just give me 1 second.
Perfect.
Now you're
How's it
cutting
now?
off on your left side again. Oh, good. Got it.
Does that look
Good.
okay?
Yes, it does.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Great.
So sorry. So we've had Persia invade Egypt. Nubia remains an independent country centered around Meroe. Now, the name Meroe is just a little interesting. And as an aside, Meroe was the name of the sister of the Persian Emperor Cambyses. They had visited the city. They discovered how beautiful it was. And so he names the city after his sister, and the name stuck. So the Meroe period goes from about 350 BC up to 350 AD. Now, as the Assyrians and then the Persians and then the Greeks and finally the Romans occupy Egypt, the Nubians have relocated their capital south to Meroe. But they're able to keep a separate and independent kingdom from those imperial powers that are in Egypt. But Meroe preserves many of the Egyptian customs that they've always had, but they still develop a very unique culture, including they begin speaking a unique language just for them, and they also develop their own writing. Now, Meroitic script, which is what it's called today, has not been deciphered. There are very few bilingual examples of Meroitic script with some other language that we know. So we don't really know what it says. But we do know that Meroe worshiped the same Egyptian gods, and they also had their own local gods. Now, this picture that you're looking at is a picture of some of the pyramids at Meroe. And you can see they are in different sizes, but there were hundreds of them, very well preserved. They're in the desert in Meroe. Meroe was a great city, according to Herodotus, the Greek historian. It was a flourishing kingdom and had a very strong iron industry. It carried on international trade between India, China, Greece, Egypt, and Rome. So it was very cosmopolitan. The Greek historian Herodotus, sometimes referred to as the father of history, describes Meroe in almost utopian terms. He says they are just, without imperial ambitions, possess great amounts of gold, and are the handsomest and longest lived of men. A couple of artifacts on the right from Meroe that you'll see that are absolutely stunning. The little guy on the top is an alabaster, which is essentially travertine, a single piece of rock of a oryx, antelope, that's been in a it's bound up like it's about to be sacrificed. If you could look into its mouth, and you'll be able to when we visited at the Getty Villa, when you look into its mouth, you'll see that it is hollow. It would have held perfume or essential oils or something like that. And then the necklace that you'll see is made out of gold and beads of carnelian. Quite stunning. One of the things that characterizes Meroe artifacts is their fineness and quality. Interestingly, for the most part, Meroe lived in harmony with the Persians and the Greeks and the Romans. Trade flourished between Kush and its powerful neighbors to the north. And interestingly, after Rome assumed control of Egypt in 30 BC, the Emperor Augustus makes a treaty with the Queen of Meroe, very powerful queen at the time, and negotiated a border between the first at the first cataract as a border between Roman Egypt and Meroe. And with a few minor exceptions, this peace lasts for the next 300 years. Some of the artifacts that we'll see is this bracelet there, very finely crafted hinged bracelet, as well as an earring stud, a very rather large earring stud made from gold. Now, the fall of Meroe occurs about 350 AD, when it is invaded by a kingdom called Axum, which is part of Christian Ethiopia. After the collapse of Meroe, it is replaced by 3 smaller Christian kingdoms. After the invasion of Egypt by the Islamic hordes, Nubia makes a treaty with the Arabs, which lasts until 1500. But there's an influx of Arab traders and Arab settlers that gradually supplant Christianity in ancient Nubia, and the last uniquely Nubian kingdom collapses and disappears about 1500. Now, these are things that I would like you to look for when we're in the exhibit, things in your mind that you should be going through. One of them is technology. How did these ancient peoples make these incredible artifacts? How did they do it? Whether it was with gold work or a bronze work, working with stones or faience. What was the technologies that were involved? Which objects were involved in commerce, and how can we tell that they were commercial objects being traded back and forth? How did the elite Nubians adorn themselves to display their wealth? And can we find in the Nubian artifacts influences from the other cultures like Egypt, Greece, and Rome that had great influence on the Nubian kingdoms? And then the importance of religion. So there is a lot of divine jewelry. These are examples of deities that are going to be represented in Nubian artifacts. And there are 3 primary gods and goddesses that we should be aware of. And I'm briefly going to go through these gods so that when you see them, you'll go, oh, okay, that's who that is. The first one, probably the most important to the Nubians, was the god Amun. Amun is often referred to as Amun-Ra. That's the sun god. The Nubians depicted Amun as the head of a woolly ram. You can see this ram's head here, which happens to be an earring stud, actually. So you can see the ram's head with the curved horns. It's the principal deity of the Nubian culture, and it's linked to virility and fertility. Amun was the creator deity and is considered across the Nubian pantheon the most important. Then there's the goddess Hathor. Hathor is a powerful and popular goddess. in Egypt as well as Nubia. She is a goddess of love, beauty, music, dancing, fertility, and pleasure. She's a protector of women, although she was worshipped by both men and women. And interestingly, wearing makeup was a form of worship to Hathor, since she was the goddess of beauty. And she's also often depicted as a cow. So in this bronze piece here, we can see Hathor is wearing a set of cow's horns up on top. Between the horns is a sun disk representing Amun. And then we actually see her represented as a cow down below. Horus is a god that we see an awful lot of, and is almost always depicted as a falcon, although sometimes you'll see him as half man, half falcon. Horus is a sky god. He, in his right eye, is said to contain the sun. The left eye is said to contain the moon. And the eye of Horus, this faience object above this quartz falcon here, is a common theme that we see over and over in Egypt and Nubian iconography. The eye is an all-seeing eye. It's designed to protect kings as well as ward off evil spirits. Then there is Isis. Isis is a very powerful god. She's the divine mother and considered to be the wife of the pharaohs. She helps the dead enter the afterlife. So on the cartouches of mummies, we will see Isis with her wings spread, offering protection and guidance to help lead people to the afterworld. She's a goddess of fertility, magic, and wisdom. And you will frequently see her with an ankh, which is the symbol of life, in one hand, and a staff of papyrus in the other. Interestingly, Isis was a popular cult in Rome at the same time. Now, somebody had asked me earlier if I could zoom in on the pendant. So this is a zoomed in photo of on the left of the goddess Hathor, who sits on the top of that pendant that we looked at earlier. Within the exhibit are going to be a couple of like iPad displays that are set up, which give large views of the artifacts. As well, so the pendant is covered under one of those, and this hinged bracelet is also covered in one of those. I will also have with me during the tours an iPad of some of the objects that are really tiny when you look at them, but they need to be blown up to see the detail in all of them. So again, I apologize for the technical glitch. Are there any questions?
Yes.
I got one. Oh, go ahead.
Does the Nubian culture still exist?
No, not really. I mean, there is what we call Nubian Africa, but it is basically what is in ancient Sudan. It is a Muslim country. All the Egyptian gods and all of that are no longer followed. Obviously, it's primarily a farming, cattle type of subsistence. They're not building monuments or building big cities or anything like that.
Thank you.
Sure.
So, Scott, what about it seemed like there were a lot of more female gods than male gods. Any comment on that?
That's a nice observation. I've never really thought about, who had the most gods in the pantheon of ancient gods. When there are multiple gods, whether it be Greece or Rome or Persia, the role of women goddesses as the mother of life always play an important role. But I can't speak to that specifically. I'll look it up though.
Thank you, Scott.
We have a question in the chat, Scott. Do they wear nose rings?
To my knowledge, they do not wear nose rings, and none of the artifacts that we found would indicate that they are nose rings in ancient times. Now, what some of the local tribes may wear today, I have seen pictures of people in sub-Saharan Africa, excluding up to Nubia, where they do have nose rings, but I don't think that's that's something that we would have seen in ancient Nubia.
Some of those pieces have exquisitely fine detail on them, and I'm just wondering how they managed to, what kinds of tools had they come up with to make all those fine lines and depictions on some of these extremely small objects.
Yes.
And not just the gold ones, but mainly the gold ones, but yes, mainly the gold ones.
Yeah, great question. And a lot of the technology we just don't understand. For example, many of the details cannot be seen by a normal eye, certainly not by my 72-year-old eye looking at it through a pair of glasses without some extreme magnification. Now, it's possible that ancient Nubian artisans were able to polish crystals to make lenses that could magnify the work that they were performing. And in my mind, that's the only way they could have done some of the detail. So in the jewelry, we see the use of molds. Both the molds would have been stone and clay. In the necklaces, for example, the very fine necklaces, we can see that gold leaf has been pounded into the mold. Then they have wrapped it around and soldered it in back. So it's actually hollow. Or let me see if I can pull up that what that looks like. Yeah. So when you see this piece, those are individual gold pieces that are all identical. They've been put into a mold, pounded into the mold, wrapped around, and then soldered in the back, and then strung together. On pieces like the chasing, or like this goddess Hathor here, it's speculated that the top piece the horns and the sun might have been cast in gold. The hair is done with very fine, almost the size of a pin, and it's called chasing, where you would use a hammer and the needle to make very fine grooves in the gold. So you can see where, like, the nostrils here, around the lips, and where the ears would have been pierced, and then the hair here, those would have all been done by chasing. This bracelet, for example, involves melted glass that is floated in to the gold base, very delicately done. So, and then combining different types of techniques together in one piece, like the pendant, for example. Let's see if I can get back to this pendant. Here, this pendant, for example, involves several different types of techniques that are then all combined into a single piece. I hope that answers kind of your questions, the best I can do.
Thank you.
But there's a question in the chat about what was the material, the wood being burned as kilns. The wood would have been cedar and ebony that was brought up from the south, and other hardwoods. You know, there's not a lot of forests in the area. So bringing lumber down the Nile from the hardwoods that are sub-Sahara would have been a big part of the trade to enable them to fire the kilns. Also a question about, did the Nubians practice mummifications? Yes, they did. Those mummies were uncovered during the excavation. We don't have, to my knowledge, extant Nubian mummies that we can display today, but we have some of the artifacts that went along with those mummies. But you know, they performed mummification just like the Egyptians as a key part of their religious rituals.
All right, we have time for one more question. If anybody wants to ask one more question of Scott today.
I asked about the hinge on the bracelet. How could they possibly do that?
Yeah, so that's amazing, isn't it? It's hinged, and so it moves in three places. You know, three different amounts. And you know, there's another piece here. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. This collar made from electrum. When you see it, you will realize that no human being would be able to fit their head through this collar. But if you look really carefully, there are two hinges that are filled with pins. So the queen who would have worn the collar would have had help. They would have pulled the pins out, placed the collar around the neck, and then reassembled with the pins. And you can clearly see those pins when you examine them. It's quite fantastic. So I have my email up. If you have a question, feel free to email me. I would love to hear from you. And I look forward to seeing you all at the Getty Villa, if not Wednesday and Thursday, some other time. And by the way, I give tours there at the Getty Villa every Thursday inside the galleries. Hope to see you soon.
Just want to thank you again, Mr. Scott Jones, for presenting today. You guys can give him reactions. You can push those little buttons or smile at him by undoing your camera. Thank you for doing that, and also our events committee for putting this seminar together. To all the individuals going on the Getty tour at the Villa this Wednesday and Thursday, please be safe and enjoy. With that being said, if anyone has any questions about Osher Lifelong Learning, I'll stay on for those individuals. If you're new to want to learn more about OLLI and how our classes are scheduled, I'll stay on for a few minutes to answer your questions. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, Scott Jones.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joel.
Yeah, we belong to OSHA at UCLA. How can we get onto one of these tours? Is that possible?
Yes, you can do any of our tours. I'll put in our website link down there. The first step is to request information. There'll be a button that says request more information. I just put it on the link. And then if you go down on the main page, there's a place where it says OLLI events. Our next event will be in March, and it will be a visit to the Holocaust Museum. Anne, are you still on to say the exact date? I think it's March 9th, but I don't.
It's March 9th, and it's a Museum of Tolerance, and we're going with an OLLI student who is a survivor from Schindler's List.
And it will be a bus trip, so we will have a bus, and we'll be making that announcement. So click on the button. The first thing is to request more information, and then there's a place for OLLI events. Great, we're glad to have you in our OLLI program.
But there are no openings on the free tours to the Nubian exhibit right now.
I have a couple of spots if somebody is interested. But I need to have email, and because a couple of people have developed other engagements, to say the least. So, but I need your email in order to give you the free parking pass.
So if that's the case and you're still here, email us at olli@csuci.edu, and then we will get that information over to Anne to send you a ticket for the Nubian visit.
So the tours are Wednesday and Thursday. They start at 2 and at 3:30. And you have